Alright, now I think we should be live. Okay. Alright. Just waiting to see a picture.
It says you're live.
But I'm seeing a blank screen. Which... Okay, so there should be a picture then. Oh, hello Aladdin. Alright, so it seems like we're live and everything's good. Yeah, so in this session we're going to be looking at the 2022 examiners report from June, and we're just looking at the paper 1, the higher paper 1 report, and joining me is Professor T Formula.
Professor, yes, T Formula. Hello.
Just a quick audio check. Now I'm seeing an error. Great. Yeah, this is what I thought might happen. Now I'm seeing an error. Great. From June, and we're just looking at the paper 1. I'm just checking the audio. And joining me is Professor T Formula.
Hello.
Yes, your sound is coming through. All right. Okay. Apologies for the technical difficulties. This is all a bit new for me. Well, I've live streamed before, but the collaboration aspect of it and getting the audio to work is new. So yeah, where was I? Yeah, we're looking at the examiner report. I thought I'd just kind of have a look through, talk about some parts that I thought were interesting. And for anyone watching, there's a question on the screen you can have a go at that I saw on YouTube earlier today. So if you are tuning in live, then give that a go if you want, and shout out the answers in the chat and see if you can get that correct. Okay, so by the way, Joel, do you have the report in front of you as well?
Yep. Yeah, I've got it.
Cool. All right. So, yeah, I think it's interesting, first of all, that I feel like this resource is so underused. I mean, like it's basically telling you what they want you to improve on for next year, right? Or what are your impressions of that?
Mostly the teachers will use it, but it doesn't seem to be something that students use very often. But it has a lot of key wisdoms that can be super useful, and you can see where most people are going wrong, and so you avoid the major mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a shame really that it's mainly focused towards teachers. I feel like there's an opportunity there just to make it available more openly for students, because like most of the advice is directed towards students, so why direct that like through teachers first? Just, you know, make that available. But I don't know. Yeah, I guess.
You could argue that a good teacher will look at it and share it with the class for next year, which is something like what we're doing now.
Yeah, that's the idea. So yeah, so looking at the introduction, yada yada yada. This paper has had a wide range of questions. I won't read through all of it, but just the first introduction I guess we could read. Wide range of questions gave students of all abilities an opportunity to demonstrate their mathematical knowledge and understanding. Students appeared well prepared for the paper. Um, and I thought it was interesting on the second paragraph here, they said students tended to struggle with questions that were unfamiliar or more complex, such as questions 13, 16, and 21. And I feel like this is probably a recurring issue year over year, right? Like, and it's something we push as teachers, like you need to be ready for questions that you haven't seen before.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
then, but it's so hard to teach that skill at the same time. Like, how do you teach someone how to answer questions that you can't show them? And then
I think
yeah,
what you really need to do is have a lot of time for a start, because you can't just last minute, oh, here's a trick. This is what you do when you're unfamiliar. It requires a lot of build up and experience.
yeah, yeah. So I don't want to put you on the spot, but like, I think this is a place maybe you can share some insight, uh,
Yeah, no, sure. So
like
when it
how
comes to the
what maybe is your approach to teaching these sort of how to answer these unfamiliar questions, or do you have any thoughts on that, like that learning process?
There's a whole big box to unpack there, actually. As a student, is what I'm trying to think about, because as a teacher, it's very different, and I can go ahead and say this technique, that technique. But let's frame it as a student. What would I do? And really, I would break my negative attitude around failure. So that sounds harsh, but nobody wants to fail. And it's especially important in maths because you're put on the spot and people want answers from you. And so having a confident relationship with mathematics, saying, okay, I'm going to try something, and it doesn't matter if it takes 10 minutes, it's really good for me, rather than expecting yourself to know the answer straight away. And the first stage can be taking a guess, even just for fun. Like, make it really loose, make it approachable, allow yourself to sink into the problem. So that would be my approach at the start. How would you do that in the long term? You might need many different experiences. As an individual, as a teacher, you would put students in situations which are unfamiliar and not support them. And, well, not support them as in don't tell them what to do. You would support in terms of positivity, you can do it. But as a student, how do you do it? Well, you probably plunge yourself into those topics that you are too scared to do. Isn't it really easy to simply do those questions that give us confidence because we know how to do them? And a lot of people fall into that trap. So it is about giving yourself, well, I guess like little wins, because when you're expected to do all this random unknown stuff at first, it feels very panicky, almost like you're drowning in water. That's an awful feeling. And it really takes that supportive attitude but self-belief. And I would start with challenges. It really helps to have someone to guide you through that. And strangely, we were talking about the challenge progression on the UKMT website, because they've got many different streams that you can go, because you don't want to jump in too hard because you immediately get a trauma effect, and you're
Yeah.
done for. And I think
Can you see the live
generally,
chat, by the way?
say again?
Can you see the live chat?
Yeah.
Okay, I was
Oh,
just checking. I wasn't sure.
someone
So
says hello,
I'll
mate.
just shout out, like if someone says hello, I'll say hi. So I don't mean
Hello,
to
mate.
interrupt.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's cool.
Hello, HA.
And I think when you approach problems in a certain way, it takes time to get used to it, that you're not going to have the structure. There's two types of question. The one is there's a skill that you can repeat, and maybe you know all the variations. And then the other type of question is where you get thrust into a situation and there's absolutely no clue as to what to do, but you need to understand the context and get through it.
Mm.
Those sort of things give you confidence. Obviously, you need to know the syllabus, but it's practice. Maybe it just comes down to that simple time old wisdom with maths that to get better, you just got to practice lots of past papers. And what we're getting at really is not it's not so much that because you'll want to get yourself in unfamiliar situation. Generally, that comes from challenge, I would say, rather than doing something weird. And there's this something they call the zone of proximal development. Like I just was sick all over the
Mm-hmm.
microphone there, but what it means is you've got this little area where you're comfortable and you can venture out of that a little bit. And as long as you do, you're going to grow. If you go too far out, you can get lost and I don't know, maybe turned off of maths forever. I really think in summation, it's about a positive attitude towards making mistakes and being okay to just go for it head on.
Hello,
And then
Rafa.
secondary, it would be challenge.
Yeah, yeah. I liked what you said there about struggle. I think that's like it's one of the hardest things to get the hang of in mathematics, that you're not always going to know the answer, and sometimes you just have to sit with the problem and be okay with not knowing how to do that particular problem, and
It's crazy, isn't it? Doesn't that
getting
sound
comfortable with that.
totally opposite of maths?
Yeah, 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 exactly. Getting comfortable with that idea that you can sit there for 10 minutes and not know the answer, and then eventually, after you've thought about it, after you've got those cogs moving, uh, things will start to click. And getting used to that process of just sitting and thinking and struggling um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
is probably one of the hardest things, and maybe it's the differential between, like as they say in their report, students tend to struggle with questions that were unfamiliar or more complex. I guess that's what separates, the grade. If you're going for a particular grade, it will separate which grade you're going to achieve, type of thing.
Yeah,
Um,
I'd like to say two things on that quickly before we move on. And a story of encouragement, which is my own story. When I was studying mathematics at university, and there was a problem that I faced, and it was the first time I really ever had a problem, and it took me 2 weeks to solve it, right? It was insane problem to me, right? We've all got our own journeys.
yeah.
And I took 2 weeks and I went to the library every day after the seminars and lectures. And eventually I solved it in 2 weeks. And I thought, my God, if I have to take 2 weeks to solve every problem, I'm not fit for this. And I won't keep up where everyone else was fine with that particular problem. But you know what? After that 2 weeks, I had progressed more than anyone in the class, and I was actually ahead of other people.
Hmm.
And that's because the learning that had taken place was rich. It had been my own, and I'd gone further than was maybe expected. And I owned that learning. It was mine, and it was deeper learning than anyone else's. And for the rest of that year, I got 100% in every test
Hmm.
because I marked that point as the point when I learned to trust myself in a question. Like, seriously, like, that is the point when I had such self-belief in my ability to do a math problem. I think that's what gave me confidence as a math teacher. I'll put up any question. It doesn't even matter if I've seen it before. I'll plunge into that and I am comfortable.
Hmm.
I guess it's like somebody jumps into a swimming pool and they're like freezing cold and they're panicking and they can't breathe, versus someone jumps in and they just lie on their back and float.
Mm,
and
yeah.
and I marked that point where I just relaxed into the question. I think everyone should have that learning
Wow,
experience.
that's a really good example. The experienced swimmer will jump into a stormy ocean and, swim a couple of kilometers, and then someone like me, who is not a very uh, confident swimmer, will look at them and think they're crazy. And I guess it's a similar idea like if you've done that, if you spent 2 weeks trying to solve a problem, you're fine. Just you're fine with uh, being given a problem and just told, just do it. And if you can't do it, if it's going to take you another 2 weeks, fine. Like I've done it before.
Yeah, yeah. It's totally like that. You've got to trust yourself and your own ability, and it just takes diving in. And the second point I want to make about, because it would just come up in the chat, was about the levels, because we talked about what website allows you to progress and slowly increase your challenge. And the maths challenges are really great for that. But I would say any particular topic, you've got certain websites that tell you, oh, this topic is grade 9, this topic is grade 7. And it's kind of rubbish because I can make any topic any level. The real difference is the complexity. And what you're looking to do is put yourself in a more and more complex situation. And that comes from challenge. And that comes from compounded questions where you are left alone to build your own character. Isn't that weird? You have to build character to get better at maths. That's strange. Feels like it should be skills.
Oh no,
But
we've got the first I hate maths comment.
yeah, well, I can tell you that majority of
I'm just
maths
joking, Aladdin.
hate or maths negative experience comes from a negative experience. It
Yeah.
comes from that one point. And really, if you talk about it and then you have someone on your side that helps you through it, you can always make it through. And I guess the motivation is that it's a great and very proud moment to have achieved something in math. So he's got a lot of
Mm,
respect to it, and it's good for you, your logical train of thought, etc.
yeah.
But it is
Unfortunately,
just the trauma.
it's a very easy subject to be turned away from. All you need is that one negative experience of a teacher or someone saying, making you feel stupid for not being able to do something, do a
Yeah,
particular question, and then it's like I'm never going to bother with this again. Um,
yeah. You don't want to be made to feel stupid. And I
whereas
think,
whereas
go
what
on.
you were saying before, uh, where it's not the speed. Like the speed of having to do a question is not the important thing in mathematics. And I've heard um, Andrew Wiles talk about this as well. Andrew Wiles is the
100%.
famous
Yeah.
mathematician who solved Fermat's last theorem. He says, maths competitions are great to get involved in a community, but speed and quickness of like being able to solve a problem is not the key aspect of mathematics. It's those willing to sit down and struggle with problems and spend 2 weeks on one problem. That you know that's they're the real mathematicians in a way.
Yeah,
Not to
100%.
discount those that are really fast at you know uh, very intelligent in that way also.
Yeah, good neural circuits. They have good mouth and mind connection. But you know that Andrew Wiles, like he's a millionaire off of his achievement. He was the slowest in the class and was failing maths quite early on. And it really isn't about speed.
Used to get used and hated maths, but over the holidays I studied countless hours and improved drastically in past papers and school assessments. Man, that's amazing to hear. Well done, HA. All
Love to
right.
see it.
Um. So yeah, that was the intro, talking about struggling with unfamiliar questions. They also mention here arithmetic errors were often the cause of lost marks when methods and processes used were correct. Um, and that's an ongoing theme throughout this report that there are a lot of arithmetic errors causing lost marks, unfortunately. So, again, we're seeing some recurring themes. I feel like we see these like year over year. Practicing unfamiliar or being prepared for unfamiliar questions and small arithmetic errors popping up, causing lost marks. I guess that those things you can never practice too much.
No, and everyone has a built-in, what most people, and that is a vast majority, have a built-in ability for maths. sometimes it's not about our ability, but how we perceive ourselves and the habits we have every day. And if we get into those very organized habits of practice, even those things that might seem boring, that's what's going to give us an outcome. And sometimes it really is, do you want it enough?
Yeah, exactly.
Find your reason.
Mohammed says, "May I ask a question?" Of course. If you type it in the chat, we might not get to it straight away, but type it there and we'll come back to it.
And I want to say this whole chat we're having so far, and even what we continue to do, is really healing mathematical problems. Like talking about how to approach maths is actually a big step to healing those negative attitudes. And if I'm reminded, I'll tell you a story about overcoming attitudes and empowering yourself a bit later.
All right, looking forward to that. Okay, so by the way, this is this is the examiner report on the paper one of the higher papers from June 2022. So, uh, this is the exam paper. I'm just showing it on screen now. This is the exam paper, and we're talking about the examiner report goes through the issues that students had with answering those questions. The first few questions usually are fine. Like they make comments like, this question was answered very well. Most students use arithmetic approach to solve the inequality. So the first few questions are usually okay. I got to question 6 and I found this interesting. They had to draw a quadratic graph. They had to they had to fill out the table and draw a graph of the quadratic using the table. And this is something that I find I've struggled with in the past. Graph sketching with a pencil, like sketching the curve of the quadratic.
The thing is, like using a pen is difficult. They tell you to use a pencil in class, but you have to use a pen in the exam.
Yeah, that's that's
Somewhat
crazy,
difficult,
isn't it? You
but
have to use a pencil to sketch a graph. I can't. That boggles my mind. But yeah, they say, a lot of students when they try to sketch that quadratic, they try to rule it with a ruler, like draw straight lines connecting the dots. And yeah, I just thought that was an interesting point. They drew the graph with a flat bottom, which resulted in a lost mark. So quadratic, of course, needs that like parabola shape.
I know we're not meant to be artists, you know.
Yeah.
There are ways that we can cope with our well, actually, if you practice art, you will get better. But let's say there are ways to cope with our inability to do art and, contingencies. If you're really struggling on this question, you can add in some more coordinates of your own. You don't just stick to the ones on the table. And then if you're joining smaller parts, it might make it easier.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was question 6, and then then they had to they had to sketch a graph of a quadratic that they couldn't factorize, basically, and then they had to use that graph to give approximate solutions. And they suggest, because a lot of students had problem with this, they suggest to mark where they think the solutions are on the graph, if that makes sense. Do you know what I'm saying?
So what if there are problems drawing it?
Yeah, so basically I'll do a quick sketch here. So they had to sketch a quadratic, sketch a quadratic that they couldn't factorize, and use the graph to find approximate solutions for x, find the roots. Is that making sense?
Yeah, hold on. I was trying to look for where you were sketching it. Ah, there it is. I see. It's just loaded
Okay,
in.
all right. Yeah, it's a bit slow. And then they're suggesting in the future, because if the answers were wrong, they couldn't give marks. But if they marked where they thought the solutions were on the graph, they could give marks for the correct method.
Yeah,
right?
method. That makes sense. And that's always a wisdom, isn't it? If you can't, I mean, that's a reason why we don't focus on the answer. Because if you just give it a go and try, you get the marks. There's all sorts of tricks there in terms of follow through marks as well. You draw something and you can get a mark for doing it on the thing that you drew, even though it might not be accurate. We might almost need to slightly abandon the idea of always having to be right.
That's a good point. Yeah, yeah, that's a really good point. We should come back to the idea of this always the singular right answer. Um, so Muhammad's question: Thanks. I've had a friend who hated maths all because his teacher implemented the idea that he was not good at it, so he naturally assumed he was bad at maths. Yet he's now doing maths at A level. Oh, that wasn't the
What?
question. That was just
Not yet. That was the preface.
yeah.
What's that website you got this particular paper from? Someone asked if it's online.
Uh, I believe the Pearson website. I'll type it in the Discord.
And you really study A level further maths without A level maths? Not really. But what what a lot of schools do is they teach them together. So they'll do all of the A level in 1 year, and then in the second year you'll do further maths. The course is designed to build upon the knowledge. That said, if you're really, really good at maths, we're talking genius level, you never need to get taught maths. There may be a really good background already. You could just dive into what might be needed in the exam so you can prep yourself a little bit. But definitely, maths builds upon itself. So you need the A level in order to do further maths, really. There's only one topic that you don't need A level maths for in further maths, and it used to be in normal maths, but it's discrete maths, which you may know as decision maths. All those things that go into networks and how your GPS works, or how you schedule critical activities at work, and anything like in business where you've got to make decisions. These are problems that can't be solved with algebra or number. And a lot of the top mathematicians, including Gauss, were saying this is worthy of its own field. Although it's only taken a long time for it to get into mainstream, it's one area of maths. In further maths, you don't need any background in.
Yep. Sorry, I missed a bit of that. So I was just getting the link for the Discord. You were talking about further maths?
Yeah, just talking about what I'll briefly summarize. You can't really do further maths without normal A level, and the one bit that you can is called decision math, which is discrete maths.
Yes.
One of my favorite, actually. There's not many teachers that teach it. There's not many resources, and I teach it at university actually now. I've incorporated it into a new um, course that I've just started, and well, it's very fun. It's very modern, and it's weird because you don't really need any other maths. It's brand new maths.
Cool. Yeah, I've briefly looked at that decision maths content, and I don't think I've really done any of that myself. Um, but it does look interesting. Okay, so should we continue? Question 7 was to do with density, mass, volume. So they say they was surprised, or it was common to see mass to like looking for density to see mass multiplied by volume and volume divided by mass. Um,
Got to remember the formula properly, perhaps.
yeah, and it
One of
also
those
makes
things from
sense if you
physics,
just
really.
think for a moment, what is density? Uh, it's the amount of stuff you have divided by the space it's within. So it's got to be uh,
Makes sense.
mass divided by anyway. Question 8. They say it was surprising to see this familiar type of question answered so poorly. This was an interesting question, actually. Um,
Oh man,
oh
this one
no,
is a
no, not this
classic.
one. No, not this one. This was just a frequency table. So finding an
Yeah.
estimate for the mean from a frequency table. Um, and they say it was surprising to see this familiar type of question answered so poorly. Um,
Do they say why? Is it the inequalities or
um,
no? I mean, I don't know. It's really simple. 3 marks. It
yeah,
should be your bread and butter.
yeah,
Midpoints, multiply, put in the formula. Usually 3 marks. What is it here? Three, yeah.
yeah,
Really, that's one of the skills you learn first. Make sure it's embedded and you never forget it. Remember it, make it like your own name. It's
yes.
like
They
it has
say
to come up.
many students appear not to understand estimating the mean at all and made no attempt to find fx. So I have a video actually on estimating the mean from a frequency table, and I did notice like around September the views on that started to go up. I wonder maybe people were trying the exam and I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah,
Looking at the error.
it's like it's one of those kind of just core skills that you I guess maybe people were taking it for granted.
Maybe there could
People were
be.
knowing how to do this and then because that also happens, right? Like there's certain subjects people expect everybody knows how to do and then it's kind of the teaching on that sort of dwindles a bit.
It goes in cycles as well, you see. Because as teachers, you think, oh, we've really nailed it this year, and then you think it's set in. But remember, there's a new class every year, and maybe then you're relaxed on it a bit. Just comes and goes, and natural fluctuations, I suppose.
Yeah.
One said in here the chat, mean and frequency tables are taught from year eight.
Hmm.
So how's that possible?
Yep.
It's like people not turned on to it, right? Because if you're learning something and it has no meaning to you, you don't care about it, then you're not going to remember it. Doesn't matter how many times you do it.
Yeah. A couple of people joining Discord. That's cool to see.
Nice.
Okay. Question 10 was a cumulative frequency table.
You know what?
Again,
This was the year of tables with inequalities that people didn't like.
yeah. Again, they suggest uh, encouraging students to show a clear method on the graph, as opposed to just writing the answers in the spot where you write the answers. So, I guess the message I'm getting here is if you're asked to graph something and you need to read some answers off the graph, show on the graph where you're getting those answers, basically, as well as writing them down so you can get a method mark there. Okay. Oh, question 13 was the interesting one that I was thinking about before.
So look.
So, question 13 was a Pythagoras related question.
But people are used to seeing squares.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what it is.
So,
Or rectangle, yeah.
so this obviously throws a curveball. There's circles on the triangle, not squares. What do we do? And I guess it is a strange question, and even the process to answer it is a little bit. It's not like a typical do this like step A, step B, step C. You have to use a bit of lateral thinking, as in you have to find a way to represent the areas of the semicircles and then notice that, oh, if I just multiply by pi on 8, would it be? So pi on. So the area of the semicircle would be pi on pi r squared and then divide that by 2. And also r is divided by 2. Yeah, so pi on 8. Right?
Yep.
Multiplied through by pi on 8, and then you get Pythagoras. And then that reasoning also is kind of complicated to explain that.
I'm going to be honest, that's fairly challenging for GCSE level.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess, so
I feel bad about that.
So this is something I want to bring up a bit later, but might as well talk about it now. what do you think are the more popular questions? Or as in, so as a student, I liked these types of questions. I liked to get my teeth into a question and really think about it. I didn't particularly like it when I couldn't figure it out. Like that's always frustrating when you get a problem you just can't work out. But I liked these types of questions that require a bit of ingenuity, and you could kind of show, oh, I like this subject. I like these types of things. Look, I can do this. Um, but but I don't know. Do you think that's a common attitude? Do you think maybe people they just want the kind of tell me how to do it. I just want to get this over and done with, or what?
100%. Do you approach the exam thinking, "Oh, I hope easy questions come up"? I mean, it's the exam, right? We all want things to be challenging outside as long as there's low stakes. It's like simulations. But then in the real thing, everything is so much more pressure. Like I tell students, if it's your exam, it doesn't matter like what exams you've seen before, it could look very similar, but because it's your exam, it's like jumping into cold water. And that shock of it being your exam is enough stress as it is. So I have had some students though, and if they're fully prepared for the exam, they go in like, well, they don't whistle, but imagine somebody really happy because they're like, yeah, let's do this challenge. I
Mm.
suppose you were one of those because you were well prepared and confident, yeah?
Uh, yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe it's like it's not nice to say, but maybe it's like an ego thing. Like I'm not a lover of exams. I don't think they're particularly great in terms of learning. But as someone, if you like a subject, then an exam is an opportunity to maybe show that you're good at it. Possibly, like
Yeah.
when maybe you might not get that opportunity otherwise. Um, Maybe that's where that's coming from. I'm not
I'll,
sure.
I'll, I think so, but I will say that everyone has to be tested in a way that is not bias. And because there's so many people, it has to be in an exam, right? So loads of people in one space. And if it was ideal, everyone would have their own space and they could talk freely and we could explain things but they just can't do it because there's so many people. I think it does come down to resources and money at some point.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it isn't the ideal. It can't be the ideal way of testing someone. It just can't be. It doesn't suit everybody for sure.
Yes. I agree. Mohammed is asking, what grade did you guys get in GCSEs? He's asking us and also chat. Uh,
Well, you won't believe what I did at GCSE. I was actually a bad student at GCSE, so you shouldn't follow me. I didn't revise GCSEs, but I got back in the old days. They used to get letters, so I got an A star, and it was like, don't follow my lead at all. I was lucky, I know that. Um, and when it
so
got to A
you heard it
level,
here first. Professor T Formula is saying, don't study for GCSEs and you'll get an A star. That's his advice.
no, no, but like I was lucky, and actually, well, I mentioned it earlier. If you're really, really gifted at maths, like perhaps some sort of genius at it. I mean, way beyond anything that I could imagine. I'm actually somebody who works quite hard for it. Then you really don't need to study, but that is so rare, and everyone needs to study. I'm a seriously hard worker. Um, but yeah, A star I got something like 92%.
Nice. Yeah, so we don't have GCSEs in Australia where I went to school, but I guess equivalent for me would have been at grade 9. I mean, I just
Oh, you
had
do have numbers, okay.
we just had A's, B's, and C's, and I got an A. So I don't know that it's just or an A. I can't remember if we got A pluses or not.
HA, please. Yeah, not it's not advice. I have to say it's not advice, but you can at least give me some credit for being honest, because that's all I am. I matured a little later, and my idea of maturity is knowing what you want, right? It's not like, oh, you've grown up, you're not silly anymore. it's knowing what you want, and therefore you prioritize the work to get there, and then you play. And yeah, no, but I'm definitely a hard worker, not somebody who is naturally gifted at maths. Somewhat gifted, but I work hard.
I'm curious
Um,
if anyone watching wants to share their opinion on this question or this
please.
type of question, this problem solving type of question. Do you like it? Do you dislike it? Do you want to see more of this? Do you want to see less of this? Any thoughts in the chat?
I think anxiety comes to mind.
Yeah, yeah, especially in a timed exam situation, for sure. Um,
Well,
oh,
it would take time for people to
yeah.
formulate opinions on it, but if there's any worries that people have, just mention it in chat. I'd like to address it and talk. Still got my empowerment story for later, which is actually
Uh-huh.
quite a good one.
Aladdin says, I don't know or remember, it's just maths. You're not dumb. Absolutely. I hope I don't make you feel that way, or I hope anyone doesn't make you feel that way. It's all good.
Aladdin, like, there's just sometimes little bits of information that you missed. Maybe you were ill, or maybe it's just not your thing, and you don't have to be. I'm going to talk about empowering yourself later, but all it takes is just to re-find your ability to be brave and try at the right level with the right support. Like I personally, I'm all ears to hear what kind of videos people want to see on maths because that really is what I'm searching for. It's hard to find that information, and if there is a particular thing, I've seen people learn about prime numbers or basic algebra in when they were 17, 18 years old, and then suddenly it clicks and they're absolutely genius at maths. It was just that one little thing that was missing, and it does not it's not a mark on your ability or intelligence or anything.
Mm. I relate with Muhammad. He says, I like those type of questions. They make my brain work. And once it's solved, I get a sense of relief like no other. I can relate to that. Um, okay, should we keep going? Question 15 was on vectors. It's not bit anything that stuck out to me in that one. Uh, yeah, just some.
Pretty standard, actually, that
Yeah.
one.
Question 16, they say this question was answered overall. Overall, this question was answered very poorly, with a number of students unable to find an appropriate strategy to work out the probability of passing the practical test. I have to say, I'm not surprised. Um, it's it's a difficult question, and these probability questions, where they're worded, they're always worded differently, and it's really easy to trip up on these types of questions. So that doesn't surprise me, and I think probability is an area where we have to improve in our
I no, I
in our
personally
teaching.
love probability. Just gonna say that now.
Uh, yeah, and that's good, and I think we probably need more of that um, in in education because I think it's a subject that doesn't get enough attention. Maybe it's like,
I
yeah,
think
I
it
don't know.
doesn't because I tell you what happened to statistics at some point. There were people that were turned off by the idea that you could manipulate the answer to be whatever you wanted it to be. If you manipulate the data, if you manipulate the graph to convince people of anything you want, and therefore it doesn't really tell you anything, it's just there to manipulate you. And it's an absolute lie, really. And it comes down to whether you have any integrity as a scientist. And really, the Winton team at the Cambridge University Centre are looking at the data integrity and how we communicate that data across to the public. And I recommend you look them up, actually. They've got a really good YouTube channel called the Winton Centre, Cambridge, and you'll see Professor Sir David Spiegelhalter talking about risk ratios and all this sort of stuff, and how actually it's extremely important to what happened recently with COVID and everything, because the way we communicated those statistics caused a lot of trouble. And, statistics can get a really bad rep for that. And it's down to us as people who study it to study it properly and really, I guess, respect it. One thing that a lot of people are surprised about is how it's used to explain the universe. It's the only science that we know to explain the future, to have any sort of idea about what's going to happen.
Prediction and
But
so on.
B, to understand, sorry?
In terms of prediction and that kind of thing.
Yeah, just like what's going to happen. Well, let's make some odds on that so that we can use a bit of game theory and predict and make the best decision that we could. It doesn't mean it's going to be the perfect one, but we try our best. And second, that we use this statistics in quantum theory. So, I mean, I'm not going to go too much detail to that, but it's a very important theory that explains what's going on in the universe. And I think a lot of people, especially those motivated enough to tune in today, that's going to be inspiring, because if you're curious, you're going to be asking those questions. How does the universe work? And at the moment, statistics is the language for understanding that.
Hmm. What
I
was
think
that?
that
What
gives
was
me
that resource
motivation.
you mentioned? Sorry.
Say again?
What was that meant? That resource you mentioned?
Oh, well, there's a YouTube channel that they run as well, but it's the Winton Centre,
Winton
which
Center.
is
Okay.
yeah, at Cambridge, and they're actually coming to a close from funding at the end of the year. But they do some great work, and um, there was a professor called Claudia Schneider, and she works in the psychological department on communications. Was on the radio recently, and I listened. It was just fantastic, and that is an example of where statistics is so empowering. I mean, you just got to look at the history of David Spiegelhalter, because the things that he's done with
David
statistics is
Spiegelhalter.
he's saving lives, thousands of lives, and I'm not kidding.
Okay.
Anyway, we've gone off on one about stats because I just love stats.
That's cool. Love to hear the passion. Yeah, I'm not. I haven't heard of David Spiegelhalter before, but I'll look into him. Um, yeah. So I'm just jumping ahead a little bit because the next few questions weren't particularly interesting. One on proportions, one on just a numerical problem.
I think I should
Question.
probably talk about the question 16, the probability one,
Uh,
because like what makes it difficult?
do you want to go
So
through a
yeah,
solution, or
no,
is
no,
what
no,
do you?
not a solution. I just want to identify why it's difficult and what you might do to do it like better. If you look at the question, it doesn't give you a tree diagram straight up. It
Okay.
doesn't give you a structure to work to. And that's what's the problem. It's one of the skills that you learn by doing the UK maths challenges. You learn that if there's a value that you're expecting to see in a question that you're not given, you give it a letter yourself and work through the question as you're expecting with that letter. And actually, that's an advanced skill of confidence to say, look, I'm expecting this, it's not there, so I'm just going to pretend it's there with a letter. And that's what was difficult about question 16. And I think knowing very well the structure of a tree diagram and then saying, right, I think this is a tree diagram, and what would it take for it to be what I'm expecting, and then filling in a gap with a letter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So identifying that you need to use a tree diagram is maybe difficult when it's not there. Yeah, because these questions often have the tree diagram there for you. So maybe that was the trip up for a lot of students.
I think it's around the language as well, because you can see that two events happen. and you're used to the question that they give you at
Yeah.
the end after you've filled it out. So if you notice two events happening after one another and they're independent, very good clues for
Mm.
tree diagram.
Yes. All right. Yeah. So I'll skip ahead to question 19 surprised me. 19 they say relatively few students could demonstrate the necessary skills of algebraic manipulation to solve the equation and give the answer in the required form. Um, yeah, I mean, again, this is like one of these kind of bread and butter sort of questions, right?
Yeah.
It's just an equation. You just need to know how to work with algebraic fractions, and you should be fine, really. Um, So they say many students were able to correctly write the two fractions in with the common denominator and gain the first mark, but a significant number were then unable to carry the algebraic solution any further. Uh, so not even reducing it to a quadratic, so they got stuck before that. I don't know. What do you think? Is that surprising to you, or?
No, because these sort of questions are quite abstract and you get lost. And the way to stop getting lost is sometimes obviously practice, but writing what you've got along the way. And I think you can get lost in doing what you think is there because you recognize it, but then not really understanding the context. So, and it's certainly not. Towards the end of the paper, you're going to have questions that don't have very easily the context involved. We do what we can in different situations, like maybe draw diagrams and
Are we
label things as you go along. But
are we looking at the same question? Question 19. What is abstract about question 19?
hold on, I thought maybe we are looking at. I was looking at 20. All right, let's have.
Ah,
Oh, well, question 19. Oh, well, I mean, abstract is totally, there's no context at all, is there? I mean, look at it. You've got two algebraic fractions. It's basically a skill.
yeah, that's why
You have
it's like
you
it's one of
repeat the
these
skill,
core skills, I think.
and you've got to be confident enough to repeat them under stress. So a lot of people want to avoid
True.
tests on the lead up to the real thing because they don't like stress. Nobody does. And well, actually, you've got to do the opposite. You've got to put yourself under stress, and it's best if it's not external, meaning you've got to put yourself under difficult conditions and really push yourself to the limit that you think, whether that's a timed or whether you're pushing yourself to do those questions that kind of scare you and you learn a little bit as you go along. The best kind of teacher that you can get for support will never tell you how to do it, but give you a hint. And that's who you really want on side. But there's a lot of steps to the question 19. And I think people can get bogged down even looking at give your answer in the form of p plus or minus square root q over 2, because that almost indicates, oh, I should know where I'm going straight away. And you don't always see it.
Mm.
And you've got to be flexible enough. You've got to have practiced enough questions to have the right skills to adapt to this question as well. You've got common denominators, but they've shoved a one on the right hand side.
Yeah.
So sometimes you've got to think about how that balances. And I think the only way to do that is to be relaxed in the exam. And that comes from all that practice and work on confidence.
Mm. And the last two questions, of course, always generally going to be the hardest ones. Question 20, I was actually encouraged to read. They say it was pleasing to see many students attempting to draw diagrams to help them structure their response. So question 20 is like a geometric question where it's all worded. They're describing a situation with a circle. So just a quick look. Yes, the center of a circle is at a particular point. Coordinates lie in the circle. So it's a geometric problem, but it's all worded. And something I always say is, if you're given this type of geometric problem, draw a diagram. This is one of the first things you should do, just to get an idea of what's going on in the question. So the fact they're saying many students were attempting to draw diagrams to help them structure their response, that's really awesome, I think. A great first step with those types of questions. And they say a good number were able to find the gradient of the tangent and use y equals mx plus c to find the equation of the tangent. So it seems like that question was done quite well, which is good. And then, of course, the famous question 21. Which is, like, they generally stick one of these types of questions in the non-calculator paper. They say it's
No, I was
proved.
actually trying to get a video on this one. I didn't finish the series, but it's all about adding the correct lines, I think.
Yeah. We were talking about this yesterday when we were like setting up for this live stream. I was saying, I feel like there's always these questions that just have this one little trick in them. Or this is my perspective. Like, if you can just figure out that little trick, then you're good. Like, it's just this extra little lateral thinking step that gets you there. So they say this proved to be a challenging question, with very few students showing any understanding of what was required to find the total area of the two shaded regions. Most students failed to find a successful strategy, and working out was often messy and difficult for examiners to follow. Which is not
desperate.
not surprising. I mean, they kind of do this on purpose. They put these questions in and they know not everyone's going to be able to do it, and it's their idea of saying, hey, we need to know who's going to get a grade 9 and who's going to get a grade 8, and this is the question that tells us who's going to get those grades. Whether you agree with that approach or not, I don't know. But yeah, that's kind of what they do.
You know, some people are not geometric minded. They don't think with shapes. And some people, they prefer numbers and algebra. So you're not going to be great at everything. So I wouldn't beat yourself up too much on this one.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So then we've got the summary, and we're about to end, I think. It's almost an hour live stream. We'll just finish on this. So they say, take care when carrying out arithmetic operations and check your working to avoid careless errors. How many times have you heard that at high school from your maths teacher?
Yeah, it happens because you're stressed, you know. You got to be confident and stay calm at all cost. And that really comes from, you know, the age-old practice. Yeah.
Yep. And consider whether an answer is reasonable of a sensible size. That's something you generally hear a lot as well.
Which is maths sense, and you can develop your skills with sensibility if you get into the practice of taking an estimate or a guess before you actually calculate, and that building that sense of guessing is really good.
Yep. And that point about the graphs that I was saying before, which is not something I guess I'm highlighting it because it's not something I typically encourage. So if you're drawing a graph in an answer, show where you're getting your answers from the graph, and that's going to help you get method marks. I think that's something I took away from this report anyway, that I'll be doing in the future. Yeah. Practice working out estimate for the mean from a group frequency table. Okay, so
Yeah, well, that's obvious because it should be good for them, and that's why they put it there.
Yeah. Heard that way too many times, but the exam environment takes over. Yeah, of course. Yeah, the exam environment is a different beast when it comes to like the pressure and the stress and the time limit. Of course, it's very, very natural to make those mistakes. It's so much easier to say don't make those mistakes than to actually not make them. So did anybody work on this problem here that we put up at the start of the live stream? Any ideas in the chat? Over here we have this quadratic raised to the power of another quadratic and it's all equal to 1. Where might you start with this problem? And I guess Professor T formula, if you want to share your story.
Yeah, actually, that would be. I was going to end on that because I'm going to make it a short one now because of time. But I just think a lot of the attitudes that we've seen today will benefit from the attitude of empowering yourself. And something I've learned over the many years of teaching maths and seeing people transform into brilliant mathematicians is the turning point when that happens, that metamorphosis is when they choose to like something that they think they're a slave to not liking. You know, that you think that you're absolutely compelled, that you can't do anything about it. You just don't like it. But you will see major changes if you decide every day to choose to like maths. And I know that sounds really simple and maybe overly simple, but it's actually a mantra. You tell yourself every day, yes, my favorite subject today, maths. The really weird thing is, even if it's not true, and you build up this excitement around it, your body doesn't know the difference. And then you turn up to math and hey, you start liking it, you start doing better. And that's quite powerful, I think.
Choose
And
to like mathematics.
sorry?
Choose to like mathematics.
Yeah, it's actually a mantra. You've got to be a bit forceful on a daily basis. Just wake up and say, yes, I got maths today, my favorite subject. You can even make a joke of it, but it's still going to work.
Okay.
And a little bit of a tip on exam stress, giving all the way the tips today, is turn your nervousness into energy because it can be turned either way. It could be dread or it could be energy. So see it as energy. And that's enough for me.
What was that last point? So you could see it as you could see mathematics class as dread or energy.
No, when you're nervous about an
Ah, when
exam
you're nervous, yeah.
and you've got those nerves and you like your stomach goes funny and you just can't do anything and you're frozen almost and you just that's what ruins your performance in the maths exam because you're focused on it being dread because you're suddenly thinking of all the things that go wrong because it means so much. Like sometimes the best exams you sit are the ones that you don't care the outcome, and it's because you've turned that you've got rid of that nervousness. But what you can do is not treat your life like gambling because you don't want to just say I don't care about the exam. Instead, you can use that nervousness that you have inside and don't call it dread, use it as energy because you know what? It's your body getting ready for battle, the maths battle, and use it as energy. You become superhuman energy at that point.
Aladdin's third eye is opening at 3 a.m. That's always a good sign.
I think that's a great sign. Third eye.
I think it's a great point actually. Just like almost forcefully change your mindset and change how you're thinking. Or it's like that advice. I've heard this advice before. If you just smile, even though you don't feel happy, if you just force yourself to smile more, then I think they showed scientifically that it improves your mood just by smiling.
Literally, yeah. Your body doesn't know the difference. So if you smile, your body releases really happy hormones. So like, wow, you can force a bit of happiness just by smiling, forcing yourself, and then eventually, my mum, she always said a little phrase. She said, "Fake it till you make it," and a lot of people use that phrase. It just means force it a little bit, but eventually that turns out to it becomes real.
I'm thinking of that meme, though. Um, I forget what they're called. You know that smiling face with the uh, with the crying eyes behind it, like wearing a smiling mask, and then behind the mask is the tears. But yeah, no.
Sad. Okay. Yeah.
I think still, like, I've had those periods where I just felt like nothing was going right, and I took that advice. I just, started trying to think positive, and I would just walk around the house smiling. It sounds really stupid, but I don't know. Maybe it helped. Um, should we just finish this problem off before we go?
Indeed. Good idea.
Um, Pomodoro technique. Yes. Yeah, I've used that before as well, where it's like study for 20 minutes, take a 5 minute break. Study 20 minutes, take a 5 minute break. That helped me through university actually. Is staying up late to revise good? It depends, I think. If you're a night owl, it can help.
I'm a night owl, by the way.
Mm.
Fellow night owl in here. Like my best work is done between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. But I don't. You've got to know yourself, haven't you?
Is staying sorry, answer that. Do you guys think it matters which sixth form you go to? Uh, I'm I probably can't help too much. I don't have that much experience of the UK school system as I went to
Whereas I do.
school in. So,
I've
any
been a
thoughts?
head of sixth form for a number of years and head of Key Stage 5 maths, so I can give a bit of advice.
So, which sixth form is? Does it matter?
I'm just going to read the question first.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it comes down to how much work you put in. Of course it does, yeah. Because there is a direct correlation with how much work you put in and, listen carefully, to achieving your potential. Because it doesn't matter how much you scream like Goku. "Grr!" You're not going to go Super Saiyan if you're not built that way. So you can maximize your potential that way. Sixth form, I had a bad sixth form, but it didn't stop me. And you could use that as a case to say, okay, well, you know, it doesn't matter. But actually, I think it does. I think I was lucky. And what you miss out on at sixth form is building a more rounded person and having opportunities. And I would say that it really depends on what you're looking for. And I'm going to say a few things now that might open your eyes. At general secondary schools, anyone you could get lucky. The Ofsted report, if it says outstanding or in special measures or whatever, it's not actually going to be anything about your experience there. Your experience is mostly what you make it. That said, there can be a lot of influences which make it harder if there are people that mess around or you don't get that opportunity to enrich your life through clubs and opportunities and such things. If you go to secondary schools where the children have different connections to industry, for example, because their parents are more professional, you can have connections that will last for a lifetime and give you more opportunities. So a lot of people go to sixth form at a grammar school after a standard school or a private school and things like that. The problem with private school is it sounds really good and you pay for it, but it's also less regulated and therefore a lot of really good work happens in state schools. And also, another thing, there is a big divide, between people that are at Oxford and Cambridge and things like Tiffin Grammar School in London, um, who get a lot of funding and they get teachers that are very organized, highly qualified, with a big support network and doing all such things. It really depends what you want out of it. But yes, there is a difference. But I think personally, I would have preferred to have gone to a better like school, the sixth form that gave me opportunities. Now, I did learn a lot of lessons about life going to a standard one, but it's roundabouts and swings. Mostly wherever you go, it's what you make of it. I mean, is there any particular college or sixth form that you were thinking of? Sometimes it depends if you're going to actually get into them. You've got to just put up with where you are. I can tell you that the best schools in the UK are in Hertfordshire, and
Hertfordshire.
good luck moving there because the house prices are so high because of it.
Because of the good scores.
Oh, because of the good schools, yeah. I mean, your
Yeah.
parents might want to live there to get you into those schools, but really,
Mm.
it's kind of it's difficult. You have to make do, and really that is the empowering message that wherever you end up, you can make the best of it. Like my partner, for example, she was the best student in the country in her studies. She didn't settle for what she had around her. She did go to a pretty decent school, but it wasn't enough. She saw opportunities to study in the United States at Princeton and all these very executive places, and that was off her own back. And she's fantastic achiever, and she's had some wonderful experiences, and that all came from within. And even people around her were quite negative, let's say, and not or they didn't aspire, or there wasn't much going on. She really pushed that. I'm a big believer in making your own destiny.
Mm. Yeah, I worked at a school in Adelaide, uh, and yeah, the like it was funny because we have zoning in Australia. If you're in a particular zone, you can go to that public school. So there was like this line on a map that you could draw. If you're on one side of that line, you can go to that school, and if you're on the other side, you can't get into that public school. And the house price difference between like across that line was like like way higher than you would expect just because of the zoning.
Yeah, yeah. So, like, those are things you can't really control. So, what I'm trying to say is try not to worry too much as long as you're switched on and know what you want. Like, really, that's the key. And it happens at different ages for everyone. I was a little bit later than usual, but some people really early, at about 14, 15, they know what they want to do. And you stay focused and think about all those opportunities and you fight for them. You can have them if you take them.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, good luck, HA, with your research into finding a good sixth form. I hope it goes well. And thanks for everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Professor, for joining me.
Not a problem. Been a good
Um,
time.
and if you gave that question a go, the answer is there now. Uh, well, we got a couple of I don't know how to do it, and I have no ideas. So, well, there wasn't much of interaction with the question, but if you were curious, there's the solution. All right. So should we do this again next week, or what do you think?
Yeah, I'm easy. I'm easy. There's three papers to go for and lots of advice to dispense.
Alrighty. So we'll see if we can make this an ongoing thing. Um, anyone in the chat have any thoughts? Is this useful? Would you like to see more live streams? And again, thanks for tuning in and thanks for participating. Yes, the video will be up. Yagami Light says, yeah. Okay, cool. Alright. Well, see you next week, hopefully, then. Alrighty. We are out.
Take care, everyone.